Hey everyone, I'm Case Aiken, and I didn't expect to be back talking about more player-facing Dungeons and Dragons material so quickly after the back-to-back Heroes of Faerun, and then also the Unearthed Arcana that came out the same week. But apparently, there's more stuff coming out, and so we just got Astarion's Book of Hungers, which has a bunch of player-facing options that I was surprised to see, frankly. I kind of assumed this was going to be mostly some adventure stuff and some maybe a background or something like that, but I was surprised to see that there is a whole lot of material that players should take a look at in this book. So, for those of you not familiar with Astarion, he's a character from Baldur's Gate 3. He's one of the main NPCs that join up with your party, and in fact, you can play as him in one of the origin paths. He is, not surprisingly, a Dhampir. He has vampiric traits to him, and that's revealed pretty early, so that's not a huge spoiler. For anyone, it's like literally the first time you take a long rest with him as a party member, you find that part out about the character. So this is a big book of vampire stuff, and now we already had the Dhampir race in fifth edition, which gets updated here. I'll go over some of the details on that one. And Dhampirs are half vampire, half humans. If you think of Blade, that's a pretty good example of a half vampire, half human. I personally was made familiar with the term and think most frequently of the character Vampire Hunter D, which I have actually built in Dungeons and Dragons before using a Gloomstalker and a Dhampir. So it's tried and true in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, having an undead character type that is not quite fully into the realm of an unplayable monster, still keeping enough of the human qualities to keep it going. And there are a bunch of feat in this book as well. So I'm going to go down the list and talk about all of these here. We're going to talk about the Dhampir first. It's pretty similar to the way it was in 2014, with a couple of key differences being it got nerfed a little bit, and some of it is structural. So the Dhampir used to be a template that you applied to an existing race, and you lost all of your racial traits and replaced it with the Dhampir ones, which included the ability to change what ability scores you got increased. That's gone because that's been moved over to backgrounds now, so you're not double dipping on the kind of ability bonuses that you could get. As far as features go, so it's a humanoid character. It's either medium or small, and it has a speed of 35. It seems that D&D has moved away from giving restrictions to speed, reducing it to 25 for the small races, but it's still big in favor of giving buffs to races to have increased speeds. And that speed is the same as it was in 2014, and the ability to be small or large is the same because it was a template you apply to an existing race. Now, as far as other features, they get dark vision with a range to 60 feet, which is the same. They have resistance to necrotic damage, which is nice. That will come up sometimes, especially if you're fighting undead themed kind of monstrosities. That's like necromantic magic is very often linked with necrotic damage. Here's where the nerf happens. Vampiric Bite. When you use your unarmed strike and deal damage, you can choose to bite with your fangs. You deal piercing damage equal to 1d4 plus your constitution modifier instead of the normal damage of an unarmed strike. So back in the 2014 rule set, this was you used your constitution modifier for the attack and damage. This is strange. D&D 5th edition has not liked having different types of your ability modifiers for the attack versus the damage roll. That used to be the standard in things like 3rd edition, take a drink, where it was always it was always strength for damage, except for in very rare cases. So even if you had weapon finesse that allowed you to use dexterity for your attack roll, you needed strength for the damage part of it. 5th edition has typically not had a scenario where you have split stats, but here there is one, and I find that distressing. I don't like this from a design standpoint. I think 5th edition keeping everything unified is a good choice, so I think that's a bad call. It also was one of the rare ways that you could use Constitution as your attack modifier. That, and then now with True Strike, being a sorcerer cantrip, you could grab it with the Aberrant Dragon Mark and use your Constitution modifier for True Strike. But this was the only way to do it just as part of a regular unarmed attack. And it's kind of a bummer that now you need to split your stats for whatever you're using this particular ability for. Now, it has 2 riders that are pretty nice. If you are attacking something that isn't a construct or an undead, you get either drain them and you gain hit points equal to the piercing damage dealt by the bite attack, or you can strengthen yourself. You can gain a bonus to the next ability check or attack roll you make within the next minute. The bonus is equal to the piercing damage dealt, and you can do this a number of times per day equal to your proficiency bonus. This is the same as it was in 2014. I also skipped over. They get Spider Climb, which is a climb speed equal to their speed. And when they reach level 3, they can move up, down, and across vertical surfaces and along ceilings while leaving their hands free. So this is very good. A little less good for a monk, but good for characters in general. So I'm really bummed about the nerf to Vampiric Bite. It was such a unique ability to be able to rely on your Constitution modifier, and a thing that theoretically a caster might actually have a decent con score as their secondary stat, that I thought it was pretty cool just to have as a separate thing. And now you're going to need this in addition to whatever your main stat is, and at which point you're just going to wish that you were using your main stat if it was strength or dexterity. So it's a bummer. I don't like that change, and I would probably house rule that it uses con for both attack and damage at my tables. It certainly would be easier to explain to the players that I have that are not as up on the rules idiosyncrasies. But it is what it is. So Dhampir is mostly fine. It's potentially very useful. The spider climb ability is great. Like I said, monks already get a lot of the climbing ability built into their class. But for a barbarian, this could be really great. So yeah, spider climb is nice. The drain stuff, like all the rider effects for the bite are nice to have things that you could do as part of making unarmed attacks, but it is a bummer that it is no longer based on your con modifier for the attack roll. So that keeps this from being as exciting as it used to be. It used to be one of the races that I really liked, and now as a species, it's been nerfed in a way that just is a little bit depressing. But moving on to feats. So these are vampire themed in general. We get 3 Origin Feat and 3 Epic Boons, and then we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 General Feats. So there's a lot of cool options here. And as far as prerequisites go, the only prerequisites that I see are the level caps or the level requirements for things like the General Feat and for the Epic Boons. So unlike what we were seeing in Heroes of Faerun, we're not seeing all these feat being gated off by putting you in feat chains. So let's take a look, and we're going to go down the list, starting with the Origin Feat. So we have Tireless Reveler. This is when an ally you can see within 60 feet of yourself expends Heroic Inspiration. You can gain Heroic Inspiration if you lack it. You can use this benefit a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a short or long rest. Okay, this is a good way to be selfish about your Heroic Inspiration, to get it consistently. Now, if you've got a human in your party, if you've got someone with the musician feat in your party, these are good ways to get Heroic Inspiration added on to you. And so this is an option if you are playing a character who's in a party that already has access to Heroic Inspiration pretty easily and just want to keep adding to it. I don't think this is the best Origin Feat for getting Heroic Inspiration, but it's certainly nice that there's an additional option for it. And this one doesn't really have that strong of a vampiric vibe, so I don't think you're really gated off into it. If you're playing a human or if you have a warlock dip in there, you can easily pick up this feat and just add Heroic Inspiration to your character. Proficiency times per long rest, or per short or long rest, pardon me. So that potentially could be a lot. It has to be an ally, so you're going to be gated from how effective this is based on how much inspiration is out there for your allies to use that you can then get on top of yourself. But I mean, it's potentially 18 uses of heroic inspiration a day if you do 2 short rests. Like that's quite a bit of heroic inspiration, and like I said, even at low levels, if you're doing 2, that's 6 heroic inspirations per day. With that shorter long rest. So it can be a lot, but you need your party to have access to heroic inspiration already to really get that benefit, or for your DM to be generous with how he gives it out. Moving on, Vampire Hunter. 2 benefits here. Adroit Escape. You have advantage on checks to escape from non-magical restraints and the grappled condition. Okay, that certainly fits for someone who is trying to escape being grappled consistently. Would be very helpful for a character who is being thrown into that situation a lot. And vampires are going to try to grapple you so that they can bite you. So that is, that fits the vampire thing, and I can certainly see this being useful. I've played melee characters that got grappled ad nauseum by monsters that had impossible checks to get out of. And so having that advantage could be the difference there. So that, it's useful. It's not a huge feature, but it's useful. And then Vitality Ward. When you take necrotic damage, you can take a reaction to mitigate the damage. Roll a number of d6s equal to your proficiency bonus and add them together. Reduce the necrotic damage by the total you take. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. Okay, so this is once per short rest, negating a 2 to 6d6 necrotic damage. You need to know that you're getting hit by necrotic damage, and big necrotic damage, frequently enough for this to be worthwhile. The lack of uses, I mean, short rest is not the worst recharge in the world, but it's still only once per short rest. It'll be really nice when it happens, but is this better than, say, Uncanny Dodge from a rogue? It's hard to really say. For really big hits, no. For smaller hits, you might fully wipe out the damage from an attack. So that is potentially nice. I mean, it's potentially, it's obviously as low as 2 at low levels, but at low levels, it's potentially 12 damage, and at level, at level 1, that could save a character. That could completely negate a character from going from full health to 0 on a big hit. So that has some potential. I think it doesn't come up enough. Necrotic damage is not going to come up nearly that often at low levels. And at high levels, you might be aware that you're getting that necrotic damage, and you might take this because of that. But I just think that it is too limited a number of uses for the type of damage. But then again, it's necrotic, and it's harder to get necrotic resistance or other things out there compared to some of the other damage types. So I think this is an okay feat. I think it's really good if you're in a situation where you're facing off against a lot of undead and a lot of things that deal necrotic damage. So that's fitting in that regard. So it's potentially worthwhile. But it's campaign specific. And then Vampire's Plaything. This is obviously the reverse of that. This is where you're more in the thrall of a vampire. So they get Decanting. When you finish a long rest, you can create 1 potion of healing or an antitoxin as long as you have an empty vial or flask. These liquids evaporate when you finish another long rest. Okay, so 1 potion of healing a day. That is potentially good. Or the antitoxin for some kind of poison. It would be nice to be able to acquire as well. This is an interesting starting feature here. Timely Retreat. You can take a bonus action to take the dash or disengage action. You can use this benefit a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you recover all expended uses when you finish a long rest. All right, this is not my favorite implementation of this ability, since it is just freely available to rogues and monks. But you know what? As one feature in this, this is potentially pretty good. There's going to be times where you need to do the dash or disengage, and not every time. I have played to level 20 a fighter rogue multi-class, and the cutting action is really good, but it doesn't come up every single combat because I have other things to do with my bonus action. So there is always that. And then lastly, they get Vampiric Connection. The DM determines the fate of your former vampire master. While you and your former vampire master are on the same plane of existence, the vampire can communicate with you telepathically, and you can choose to allow the vampire to perceive through your senses. This is potentially really interesting, but it's mostly a role-playing thing. A vampire master might be a thing that you really want to work with. That it might be an NPC that you are doing interesting things with. It's certainly an interesting role-playing hook, but there isn't a lot of mechanics in terms of really requiring this, because honestly, if you were this telepathic connection, I don't think I would ever think to make it a feat. I think I would just make that a condition of being a thrall of a vampire. And so I'm surprised that this is part of a feat. Like I said, it's purely fluff. So really you're getting the timely retreat and you're getting decanting. A potion of healing is not necessarily worth a feat, even an origin feat, and timely retreat is potentially useful sometimes. I'm not a huge fan of this one, if the potion of healing was you produced as many as your proficiency bonus or something like that, I would be much more interested in it. This is a little weak, and I would not recommend this to a player. Moving on to General Feat, we open with Bloodlust. Now, like I said, despite the fact that these are vampire themed, there isn't necessarily anything that's like forcing you to be a vampire for these. You don't have any prerequisites that require it. So Bloodlust, ability score increase. As with all General Feat, you get an ability score increase. In this case, it is to a physical stat, so strength, dexterity, or constitution. I like to see that. There aren't enough feat that boost constitution. So this is good here. When you roll hit point die to regain hit points, you can treat any roll of a 1 or 2 as a 3. Okay, if you are building your character around using hit point die to regain hit points, that is potentially good. It has been rare where I've felt that I was excessively using hit point die for the healing portion of things. Not that it doesn't happen, but it's only on short rests, unless you have a character feature that allows you to spend hit point die. Dwarven resilience, the dwarven racial feat that allows them to spend hit point die when they take the disengage action, the dodge action is one that I think of that could be interesting here. But this is not the main feature of this feat. Then there's Sanguine Feast. Once per turn, when you hit a bloodied creature that isn't a construct or undead with an attack roll, you can expend a hit point die, roll it, and regain a number of hit points equal to the number rolled on your Constitution modifier. Okay, so this actually ties in with Powerful Recovery, so this makes that a lot better. So I take back a little bit of my poo-pooing of part 2. This is a lot better. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus and regain all uses when you finish a long rest. I don't see why we have the restriction on proficiency bonus. You're already gated off by how many hit point die you have. The restriction is it's fine. I could see taking this. I could definitely see taking this, especially if you're trying to bump up your charisma or your Constitution score. This has some potential here. It really makes for a durable character that can stay in combat. And I could see like a barbarian really appreciating this, for example, because they're going to get so much out of it with that D12 hit die. This is a potentially good feat, especially for someone trying to top off their Constitution modifier, and they don't want Chef or Speedy, which are the first two, and not the only two, because the Skill Expert also is in there. Yeah, there just aren't enough feat that are con-based, and so this is good, and it also boosts Strength or Dexterity. Any melee character is going to like this. It doesn't even need to be melee, because when you hit with an attack roll, so any offensive character is going to like this. So that has some potential there. I like it. Bomber. Ability score increase. This one is only dexterity. Far Lobber. When you use the attack action to throw a vial or flask. You can target an object or creature you can see within 40 feet of yourself. Okay, so this is instead of throwing it at an area, you can throw it at a specific target. Attacking at long range doesn't impose disadvantage on your attack rolls with thrown weapons. This might be essential for a thrown weapon build, but I don't think I like this feat that much. I don't. I mean, I guess there's a small range increase in general because it's now 40 feet. Yeah, I mean, this is better for someone who's really built around throwing like alchemist fires or something, as a ranged thrown weapon character. But this is not a particularly strong feat. Cloying Mists. So this one moves on to, this is your mental stats, so it's intelligence, wisdom, or charisma that it gives you a bonus to. You always have the Fog Cloud spell prepared. You can cast it without a spell slot, and you must finish a long rest before you can cast it this way again. You can also use it, cast it using spell slots if you have the appropriate level. And your spellcasting ability is whatever you chose for the feat. And then Grasping Mist. Whenever you cast Fog Cloud, non-magical flames in the spell sphere are extinguished, and creatures other than you and your allies have their speed reduced by 5 feet while inside the spell sphere. So that reduction in speed is the buff to Fog Cloud, so that's pretty interesting. It is a first-level spell, so it's not like we're talking about the most powerful spell in the world, and although you could make a really big area of effect that's reducing character speed, but it's only by 5 feet. If this was making it difficult terrain, this I think would make this a really good spell. But as it is, with it being only a 5 feet reduction, it's good. It's good at low levels, but I don't think that this is the buff that the spell needed it to be to keep it aggressively good at high levels. So I probably would not recommend this feat in general unless you were really dead set on doing some cool stuff with mists and fog and making that your character thing. A once per long rest free casting of Fog Cloud and the small buff to it. I don't think this is that great of a feat. Delicious Pain. Ability score increase, any ability score increase, so that's nice. It any stat you want is increased here, and that's good. And then Toughened Flesh. Immediately after you take piercing, bludgeoning, or slashing damage, you can take a reaction to gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage until the start of your next turn. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. So this is just a weaker version of Uncanny Dodge. It's a once per short rest Uncanny Dodge. It stacks with Uncanny Dodge. Well, it doesn't. You can't take it at the same time. So it's instead of. So never mind. This is. I don't like this feat. It's nice that it gives a bonus to any stat, but being so limited to once per short rest, getting resistance. Admittedly, it lasts until the start of your next turn, so you could find a situation where you're just being pummeled. And the fact that it's all 3 of the damage types, it's not just one damage type, is not that bad. But this is a very limited use of this ability, and I could see this. This is just not that strong. The use limit's really what weakens that. It's not bad by itself. But if it could be, if it was proficiency times, I would say even proficiency times per long rest, but if it was proficiency times per short rest, that would make this a feat really worthwhile, because you don't use that reaction all the time. Again, the aforementioned fighter rogue, like I have a lot of reactions because it's it's complicated. It is part Battlemaster and part Purple Dragon Knight, but it's 5 levels of Rogue, and so I use Uncanny Dodge a lot, but I have other reactions that I use, and those Battlemaster maneuvers are pretty tasty, and opportunity attacks are pretty tasty. So, it's the once per short rest is just a little too infrequent, but I wouldn't recommend this feat overall. Lightbringer. ability score increase, one of the mental ones, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. Okay, cool. Sacred Magic, you learn the light spell and can cast it without material components. If you already know that cantrip, you learn a different cleric cantrip of your choice. The spell's spellcasting ability is the ability increased by this feat, yada, yada, yada. Solar Luminance. When you cast light, you can have the light from the spell be sunlight. Once you use this benefit, you can't use this again until you finish a long rest. And then Sun's Healing. As a bonus action, while within sunlight, which again you get from the Solar Luminance, you can expend one of your hit point dice, roll the die, and regain a number of hit points equal to the roll. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. Okay, so you can just create sunlight. Sun's Healing is nice, and you can create sunlight, which has the rider effect here, and potentially could be useful if you're fighting vampires or things like that. This is not a bad feat by that criteria. In a dark setting, you can give yourself some healing with this, which isn't bad. And in a normal setting, this is actually pretty good in a non-Ravenloft setting where you actually see the sun frequently. You can, every short rest, spend a hit point die. So that's potentially not bad. Yeah, so this is, I mean, it's obviously more caster kind of focus, so there, are there better feat for you to take here? I don't really like the light spell all that much. I think that it is fairly worthless in most games. It will come up if you have no one with dark vision in your party and you're in a dark environment. But I don't really see it being used very often, even for the utility that it could be. The buff to it being sunlight could be huge in a Ravenloft setting or in a fight with necrotic creatures that have sunlight sensitivity. So there is that. So in the Underdark, it could be viable. Basically, if you're in a darkness campaign, that part is really strong. And then if you're in a more conventional campaign, the Sun's Healing part is potentially good. But yeah, this isn't another feat that I would necessarily recommend. But I could see why you would take it, especially if you're fighting vampires. That I could see being pretty effective. So that is, yeah, it's circumstantial, is what I would say. Love Bites. So this one is any ability score. Again, great. Any ability score is fantastic as the increase. And then Endearing Pain. Immediately after you damage a creature with a melee weapon or an unarmed strike, you can take a bonus action to give the target the charmed condition until the start of your next turn or until an ally damages it. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. I think that's really good. I think this one's really good. The charmed condition, it's a way... So once per short rest, after you hit someone, you can just use a bonus action to temporarily take them out of combat. That is potentially quite good. The fact that it's just a bonus action, no save, is nice. And here's one where I would say the short or long rest is fine. The short rest conditioning on it, because you could, with no save, knock just about any creature out of combat for a round or two while you focus on something else. And that is quite potential. I mean, the charm condition, they can't attack the charmer, and the social advantage, the charmer has advantage on any ability check to interact with you socially. Yeah, I mean, it certainly can protect you very well, and if you're the frontline character, that might, like I said, totally take them out of combat if they have to travel to get to anyone else. So I could see this being pretty good. Moving on to Putrefy. So this one is any ability score. Again, great. I love to see it. Any ability score being boosted is nice. And then Necrosis. When you make a damage roll that deals necrotic damage, you can cause one creature taking that damage to have the poison condition until the start of your next turn. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. All right, so this is... When you make a damage roll that deals necrotic damage, you can... This is missing something. Like, most of these feat that have some kind of rider like this, it gives you like a cantrip or something that will do that kind of damage. this is not good. Poisoned is a good condition to instill, but like for example, the class that I could think of most that would benefit from this at low levels is the Mercy Monk, and then they just get the poison condition as a rider to their necrotic damage at like what is it, level 7? I think it is. Uh, yeah, so it's I don't see who this feat is for, because you need to be consistently giving out necrotic damage. I guess if you're built around having necrotic damage, like if your character, if you are some sort of undead thing, that could be useful. But the guidelines for building NPCs is no longer to use character classes and to build them out that way. So I'm not positive what's the best situation. It could be any spell that deals necrotic damage. Again, I'm just surprised it doesn't give a cantrip that would deal necrotic damage. That's like the thing this is missing. So I think this is just a weak feat as a result of it missing just like one additional thing. It should have a cantrip that deals necrotic damage like as part of this. And because it doesn't, like... I think you have to be a caster that's dealing necrotic damage to really benefit from this. And then, you're giving the poison condition once per short or long rest. Is this worth a feat? I'm not sure it is. Poison once per short or long rest is not a big enough condition by itself. Maybe if there was poison damage associated with it. But the poison condition is just specifically, it's you have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Now, is that again? That's a good condition, but is it by itself good enough when this only goes until the start of your next turn? So you can't even chain it with a thing of your own. It has to be chained with some sort of ally to make this really beneficial. I think this is too weak without some additional feature. So I'm not a fan of this feat. Rebuke, ability score, any ability score, again, good. I'm very happy that so many of these are any ability score. Radiant Strike, when you make a damage roll that deals radiant damage, you can cause one huge or smaller creature to have the prone condition. Again, no save. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. Again, weird that it doesn't give something that does radiant damage. Now, radiant damage is a little easier to pick up in the 2024 rule set. True Strike is going to do that just by itself. Paladin Smite's going to do that. There's tons of spells that do radiant damage. So that's good when you make a damage roll. So it doesn't have to be an attack roll. It could be something like Sacred Flame can knock a character prone. Prone is not as important. Like Putrefy, for example, poisoned is a good condition. Prone is not a bad condition, but it's not that impactful a condition. Having this being restricted once per long rest or once per short rest is that I think is not a worth a feat. Also, a lot of things are called Radiant Strikes in this game, so that's kind of silly right there. There needs to be, again, just like Putrefy, there needs to be something else thrown on top of this to make this feat worthwhile, because this part of the feat is not worth a feat by itself. Even with that nice whatever ability score increase, this is... Because compare it. I mean, like, compare it with the Battle Master, for example. So Battle Master, if you pick up the tripping maneuver, can do this with a damage bonus, and they can do it multiple times. Even with something like Martial Adept, where it was just once per short rest, that was still getting that damage increase. So I think this is weak on the power curve, and you need to have some way of dealing radiant damage in addition. And like, sure, like, it's nice if you're a paladin and you smite someone and they're prone, but prone, again, is not a very hard condition to get around. It's not always a beneficial condition to get around either, because it can instill disadvantage on ranged attack rolls. And it's... I don't think this is worth the feat as it is. Treacherous Allure. Ability and score increase to one of your mental stats. Okay, Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma. Enchanting Presence. You always have the Charm Person spell prepared. You can cast it without a spell slot, and you must finish a long rest before you can cast it in this way again. You can also cast it using spell slots you have at the appropriate level, yada, yada, yada. Inevitable Betrayal. You have advantage on attack rolls against creatures with the charmed condition. Okay, so that is some nice stuff right here. Yeah, so you can charm a person, and then you have an advantage on attack rolls against someone who is charmed, and doesn't have to be charmed by you. So that has some potential, some synergy potential there. Now, this is a caster-focused feat by virtue of it giving you a spell and giving you mental score improvements. So the advantage on attack rolls is going to be with spells, most likely. You might be like a Bladesinger or something and pick this up, but that advantage is nice. And again, Charm Person is a first level spell. I think this is a weak feat. It's interesting, but it's a weak feat. And lastly, for the general feat, we have Vampire Touched. They gain an ability score increase to Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma, mental stat. Choose one spell from the Enchantment or Illusion School of Magic. You always have that spell and the Spider Climb spell prepared. You can cast each of these spells without expending a spell slot, but when you cast Spider Climb this way, you must target yourself and you must finish a long rest before you can cast each spell in this way again. You can also cast either using a spell slot of the appropriate level. Okay. Spider Climb is a second level spell. This is a worse Fey Touched. It just is. It's a worse Fey Touched. But it's not that bad. It's at least a second level spell and a first level spell. Compare that with Treacherous Allure, where you're only getting Charm Person. Or Fog Cloud with Cloying Mist. So this isn't the worst feat in the world. There's certainly going to be some illusion and enchantment spells that you want, potentially off of spell list besides the wizard spell list. So I would have to stop and look and see if there's anything tasty on the ranger or on the paladin spell list. But there's at least it gives you some flexibility with that. You get 2 free castings of spells, one of which is a second level spell, as opposed to 1 free casting of 1 first level spell. So this is a better feat than a lot of the ones in this list, but it is weaker than Fey Touched. I'd probably put it. You know what? It's gonna be. It's in a similar bracket though with Shadow Touched. So Vampire Touched I think is. I think this is a worthwhile feat to exist. It is on the lower end of the power curve for what's worthwhile, but it is worthwhile. Moving on to Epic Boons. So we have 3 Epic Boons here, and as I've said before, Epic Boons, I think, need to be big, and they don't really matter that much to me overall, because Epic Boons come in so late in your character. Like, you have to be level 19 to take them. And thus, they need to be massive for me to really get invested in it. But we start with Boon of Blazing Dawn. Increase 1 ability score of your choice by 1 to a maximum of 30. Okay, great. It's any ability score, but that's not that weird for an epic boon. Beloved of the Sun. You have immunity to radiant damage. All right, immunity is huge. That right here, we're talking about this is going to be a worthwhile feat just because immunity is rare. Blazing Strike. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, that damage can be radiant or the weapon's normal damage type. Okay, you know what? Perfectly fine ribbon. Weird that it would happen this late in the game, but perfectly fine. Burst of Sunlight. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals radiant damage. Okay, this is why you have that radiant. You can emit bright light in a 30-foot radius and dim light beyond that. This light is sunlight. Okay, so this is where it gets really useful in a game where you're dealing with undead creatures that have sunlight sensitivity. Immunity to radiant damage is awesome, but radiant damage is less frequent. So probably the types of things that you're going to get the benefit from that sunlight sensitivity are going to be different than the things that are dealing radiant damage. But still, I could see this being really worthwhile. And the ability to throw on radiant damage to your attacks when you're fighting things like this is really good. In the right campaign, this is pretty good, and yeah, and it potentially could be great if you're fighting things that deal radiant damage. It's certainly a potentially like very strong feature. So I like this Epic Boon. It's circumstantial, but it is big when it hits, and I think that's pretty good. Boon of Looming Shadows. Any ability score increase, that's good. Shadowy Stretch. When you take the attack action, your reach for your melee weapons increases by 10 feet until the end of your turn. That's awesome. This is a really cool choice just adding 10 feet reach until every time you attack is great. So that's great. And then you can take the dodge action as a bonus action. This is a really good... Okay, I really like this. Getting unlimited dodge as a bonus action, fantastic. And getting that extra reach. This is a really good Epic Boon. I could see a lot of classes taking this. Obviously, melee is the emphasis here because you want the attack action and it has to be melee damage. But that extra 10 feet of reach is really big. If you're already using a reach weapon, then all of a sudden you're doing 20 feet, potentially more. That's incredible. Dodge as a bonus action is really good with no restriction. Like even monks would like this because then they're not spending focus points on that dodge as a bonus action. So really like this feat. I could see this going for a lot of characters. This is really strong, especially if they have a free bonus action to use. So like if it's a barbarian that is not 2-weapon fighting and not using the Nick property, yada, yada, yada. If you've got an open bonus action is what I mean. Being able to take the dodge action is really big. This is great. This is great. Man, the old Paladin would have loved this. But now smiting is a bonus action, so that's less appealing to a Paladin. But yeah, this is really good. Anyone with an open bonus action is going to really appreciate this. Yeah. Boon of Misty Escape. Increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma score by 1. Okay, this is obviously more of a caster-focused one. Gaseous Form. If you drop to 0 hit points but aren't killed outright, you can instead drop to 1 hit point and cast Gaseous Form without expending a spell slot. No action required. When you cast this spell, you can target only yourself. Your fly speed is 20, and you regain 10 hit points at the start of each of your turns for the spell's duration. The spell's spellcasting ability is the ability increased by this feat, yada yada. Once you use this benefit, you can't finish until you finish a long rest. All right, this is a way of getting the hell out of dodge if you get hurt in such a way that you would have died. I think this is a perfectly fine feat. It's very vampiric. I love this, like, ooh, the bad guy has taken enough damage, and now he's turned to mist and is escaping. Up, and he's healing as he goes. That's great. If you're trying to play that kind of a character, this is really good. I like this a lot. I mean, Gaseous Form, it's a 3rd level spell. So that, that's cool right there. You get better fly speed, which is also great. And this is a really cool feat. I like it a lot. I like Boon of Looming Shadows the most, but Boon of Misty Escape is really good too. Boon of Blazing Dawn is fine. So yeah, that's the ranking there. So yeah, this is not my favorite group of feats overall. The Origin Feats, I'm more positive about. It's also easier to get one. It costs you less to get one if you either get it as part of your background or being a human or having that Warlock dip. And then the General Feat, Bloodlust is pretty interesting. Bomber is potentially interesting on the right throne build. Cloying Mists needs something else. Delicious Pain needs something else. Lightbringer needs something else. Well, probably Lightbringer is probably fine in the right circumstance. It's circumstantial. Love Bites needs something else. Putrefy and Rebuke needs something else. These feat are generally a little on the weaker side. So not as pumped about the General Feat. The Epic Boons are surprisingly good. I'm quite happy with those, and the Origin Feat are pretty good. So this is a book with some player-facing options that I like more options existing, although I do get worried when I see a lot of splat books putting out feet. We have all survived 3rd edition, Hey, Take a Drink, and 4th edition, where lots of character options were published en masse. Now, 2014 5th edition was very slow about putting out new content. It really tried to keep its player-facing stuff to a minimum. That's why there's only 3 big books of subclasses, 4 if you count the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. There are not that many feat added in those books. It's only the racial feat in Xanathar's, and in Tasha's we get more feat, but that was a big deal when we added more feat. I'm worried about adding a lot of feat because it creates this imbalance here. But looking at these, this isn't disrupting the power curve in terms of boosting it up, but it does make some feat like stand out as being really good. I mean, look, Musician's always going to be like one of those like standout feat, and it just is better than Tireless Reveler, except for if someone already has Musician in your party. So it's interesting that, yeah, like the power curve here is generally on the weaker side. And so I'm not that worried. I'm just worried about what this means, like what this signals in terms of Wizards production, that we're going to see lots more player-facing stuff and potentially disrupt the balance the way that it was disrupted in previous editions. Like we have survived 3rd edition. Again, take a drink. And it was a fun edition that is really fun to theorycraft about, but it also had a lot of options that were completely worthless, that were traps for players. And I hope we're not seeing a propagation of traps that players could stumble into because they like the vibe, but then are just dramatically mechanically weaker than what is already available to players. So that's it for this book. There isn't much else player facing to really focus on. There are the backgrounds, but that's just really tied in with the Origin feat for that. So yeah, that is it for Astarion's Book of Hungers. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Do that YouTube stuff. It really helps this channel grow, and we've seen a lot of growth in the last couple months, which has been incredible. So I would love to have more people here. We talk about all kinds of nerd stuff on this channel. So check all that out if you like movies, comics, video games. We have discussions about just about everything here. So check that out. Check out our Patreon if you actually want to support us more directly. So if you go to patreon.com/certainpovmedia, that you can support us at any tier. Even at the free tier, you'll be getting, I do an essay a week on tabletop RPG materials, as well as one of a nerd topic of my choice. So that is a thing for you to potentially check out. And if you really are enjoying this, consider chipping in a few bucks on that Patreon. We give shout outs, we give advanced clips. So there's all kinds of stuff as rewards at any tier, but even at the free tier, we'd appreciate it. And then lastly, check out the Discord server for Certain POV. There's a link down in the doobly-doo. It's a great place to have discussions. We'll be talking about this book, I'm sure. We've been talking about all the other ones that have come out recently. So great places for tabletop RPG discussions, for video game discussions, comics discussions, movies, all kinds of stuff. So it's a great spot in general. And check all that out. And until next time, I hope you have a great week.